Hello, everybody, and welcome to this webinar on how to become a fellow at the Research Institute for Sustainability, Helmholtz Center, Potsdam. Our plan is to have about 30 minutes of presentation by me and then having about 30 minutes of question and answers afterwards. We can go also a bit longer if there are more questions. Should any questions arise during my presentation, I would kindly ask you to note them down and save them for the question and answer part. Perhaps some of the questions will already be answered during my presentation. I apologize in advance that I might sound a bit wooden and like I'm reading this out. The reason is that we have a second webinar on July 17, and I would like to give a mostly identical presentation on that day. And now, just regarding the structure of the webinar, it would be as follows. First, a very short introduction to the RIFS Fellow Program. Then we will follow up what's a fellow actually and what's different to a regular researcher or specialist at the Institute. Then I would like quickly first talking about the first step, check with us and get in touch to see if it all fits together. And then I would come to probably the main part of today's presentation, which is the application documents, letter of motivation, CV and achievements, proposal, and optional, the annex. I would then quickly provide an overview to the selection criteria, the timeline, and then we come to the open question and answer session. Now, very short introduction to the RIFS Fellow Program. It is a central pillar of the Institute, one of the central pillars, which has been going back to the Potsdam Memorandum of 2007. And the idea is to bring together a very diverse set of perspectives and competencies from science, civil society, business, and all other areas, and from around the world to address the sustainability questions of our time. We usually have about 20 to 30 fellows, depending on stay and cost per year. The reason is, for example, we could have, for example, one fellow staying for 12 months, two fellows each staying for 6 months. It could vary, so it is not a clear fixed number. It's about 20 to 30 per year. And as said, we aim to have a diverse group from all areas of society and from all parts of the world. Since 2010, over 300 fellows from over 50 countries have been part of the fellow program. And they are forming an ever larger network of fellows over the years. And what we expect from fellows is to, besides of the project, be open-minded, participate in networking activities with your other fellows, with fellows in the past, and also perhaps with future fellows coming to the Institute. Because the idea of the program is to make it as mutually beneficial as possible in an ever-growing community on sustainability questions around the world. Now, there's often actually the question, what is the difference between a fellow and a regular scientist? I would just like to quickly outline this. A fellow can be a scientist, but not necessarily. Could be an artist, could be a politician, could be a business person, while a regular researcher or scientist in the Institute is, as the name implies, a scientist or a highly specialized person. We recruit our fellows through an open call with a wide spectrum of ideas, even experimental as possible, where we could say, well, it's interesting. We don't know if it works out, but we want to give it a try. A regular researcher or scientist is somebody we recruit for a specific job ad, and we're looking for a specific set of skills and also specific expected results. Fellows are connected to one or more research groups and have freedom in their work, whereas a regular researcher is working on one group and the tasks are defined by the research group leader. The fellows are independent in time planning, including also working hours or vacation, whereas a regular researcher is actually focusing more, let's say, is dependent on how the research group leader is actually defining the work needs, vacation needs to be approved and the like. A fellow has his or her own budget in the area of 5,000 to 10,000 euros. I will come back to that later. Whereas a regular scientist, the budget decisions are made by the group leader. And the idea of the fellow is you come to us for 6 to 12 months, and then you return home to your organization or perhaps go to your next stage in your career. Whereas a regular scientist may stay with us for a couple of months, perhaps a couple of years, depending on the available budget and the skill set. So the fellows are having much more freedom and independence in their work, whereas regular scientists are people we hire to achieve a specific task. That's more or less in a nutshell what's the big difference. Now, the first step before you apply, check with us and get in touch. As I mentioned earlier, it is all about having a mutually beneficial relationship. So how can we help you to achieve your goals and how does it work? How does your work contributes to the work of the institute? That's very important for us. And therefore, key factors, or you could also say knockout criteria, are complementarity and feasibility. And I would like to quickly outline this. Complementary means, does your work connect to the topics of the institute? And is it implementable with the resources of the institute? I would like to give you an example what I mean with it. One example or one proposal we received only last year was genetic engineering for supporting adaptation of agriculture to climate change. Now, adaptation of agriculture to climate change is a very important topic. Global food security is a very important issue, but the Institute is not really working on agriculture. We have some connections, for example, where water needs, food production and energy converge in the so-called nexus, but we are not working explicitly on agriculture. We are working to some degree on adaptation, but not, let's say, it is not one of our key research areas. And genetic engineering, we are working on technologies and also risks of technology and technology assessment, but we do not have any laboratory capacity. And that was part of that proposal we received last year. It was about actually doing genetic engineering research in the institute, and we cannot create or buy a laboratory. So the idea, what I would suggest, check with me, head of the fellow program, before you submit a proposal, so we can actually see, do we have the resources, does it fit to our topics and work, and how can we make this as mutually beneficial as possible? And afterwards, after checking this initially, I would always recommend get in touch with one or more research group leaders and see how can you jointly actually develop this idea, your idea further. Now, I would like to come to the application documents. First of all the application documents must be in English. We accept no other language. And then all the application documents must be submitted as single PDF files, no larger than 5 megabytes. And that's a minimum of 3 files. That's a letter of motivation, the curriculum vitae, and the proposal. Maximum would be 4 files, the optional annex. I will explain all the documents in detail soon. And the application documents must be within the page limit. So formatting should be similar to standard setting of Microsoft Word, OpenOffice, etc. I just mentioned it because we had it in the past that, for example, people have reduced the font size from, I think, font size 11 is normal for Microsoft Word in the preset, but then going down to font size 8. Please do not do that. We will realize it. We will check this. And the application documents must be submitted to me. And the deadline is August 13 at almost midnight, Central European Standard Time. And applications which do not conform will be immediately rejected. And I mean this seriously, actually. For example, if somebody sends us 6 files, we will probably not even look at it if the proposals are too long and so on and so forth. This is the ground because we are receiving 150 to 200 applications. And so we are very strict with regards that application documents conform to the standards requirements we set out. Now, coming to the application documents, letter of motivation. With the letter of motivation, you highlight why you work on sustainability. Could you please mute yourself? I do that. And what your aspirations and expectations are. It should cover the following topics. Just basically, who are you? Where are you coming from? What's your background? What's your experience? Why do you work on sustainability? What would you like to achieve actually and contribute? What's the topic? Could be a short teaser of the proposal you're already planning. What's your motivation to work at the RIFS and not elsewhere? So could you actually say the RIFS is now the perfect or an almost perfect place to work on that? Or what can the RIFS contribute, what other organizations cannot contribute? And what are your expectations accordingly? And then, of course, which research group do you intend to work with mostly? Because, as said, it should be mutually beneficial, and fellows are not an island. They should integrate themselves to some degree with 1, 2, maybe a few research groups. You should try to cover all these topics, and please try to stay within the page limit of 2 pages. But in summary, Where are you coming from? What's your topic? Why sustainability? Why the institute? What's the expectations? That's more or less in a nutshell what should be done in the letter of motivation. Now, coming to the CV and achievements, here you describe your career path so far. It helps us to understand which experience and skill sets you would bring to the institute. We divide this in two parts, the curriculum vitae and the achievements. Now, the curriculum vitae could be very standard. The name of the current position, professional stations in your career, education, additional skills like trainings, languages you know, professional memberships, and so on and so forth. Very basic, like you would do probably with any other job application. Now, for us important is now another part, which is the so-called achievements. So what are the highlights of your career? For example, scientists may have dozens of publications, dozens of speeches they have given over the years. Artists may have created hundreds of pieces of artist work, and so on and so forth. But if you would have to nail it down and say, these are my 5 most important publications, that are my 5 most important pieces of art, that are my 5 most important, and so on and so forth, what would it be? Where you would say, this is what you are particularly proud of, where you figured a lasting impact and the greatest impact. And well, also very important, please do not provide personal information in the CV and achievements, such as your age, marital status, nationality, photos, number of children, what religion you are, and so on and so forth. We do not need this information, and it does not provide, it will not be part of any decision-making process. So it's just basically very technically, what is your career path so far, and what are your greatest achievements? And the page limit would be 3 pages in this case. 2 pages CV and 1 page for achievements. It can also be 1-page CV and 2-page achievements. We are not that picky, but it should be limited to 3 pages in total, this part. So coming to, let's say, the main part of the application, which is the proposal. And here I describe actually what is the most, what you plan to do with your time at the RIFS, what your project is, what you would like to achieve actually. And it should be structured as follows. First, a title. It should be clear and understandable. Can have a subtitle. Tip, if you have to summarize it in your fellowship in 1 or 2 sentences, or have to put it on a business card, what would it be actually? Second is the abstract. That's limited to 300 words, and it describes your work in a nutshell. Also here a tip, write it in a way that you would be comfortable to put it on a website and understandable to people outside of your own expert circle. We will not publish the proposal. However, we will use the abstract to introduce you to other researchers in the institute, to other fellows, to partner organizations, and so on and so forth. We will, of course, our present communications team, our directors will see the abstract. So it should be focusing on, if you would have described it to, let's say, an intelligent person, but it's not an expert, how would the abstract look like? Always think about it. Now, the description of work is what you're actually planning to do and why and how to achieve it. It can be as special as you want. It can be also specialist language as you want, because we will have reviewers who are able to assess that. But still, just as a tip, formulate a clear objective question, what outputs you intend, but also keep a certain openness and flexibility. We had it often in the past that fellows apply and then come to the institute and then become inspired by what other fellows are doing and what other researchers are doing. And so they are then interested to change actually what the proposal has been. It has to be still the same topic, but you have to balance a bit in trying to achieve something, but being open to new ideas you will get while you're at the institute. And the last part should be just an estimated time plan and budget. That's tentative start and end date. If you have some, let's say, key things you plan, like organizing a conference, you should also put it there, and your financial needs. I mentioned already about 5,000 to 10,000 euros as additional costs, like for travel, for workshops, for publications, and so on and so forth, is something what you on average provide for a fellow. It can be more, but it needs, of course, then to be justified. But just to give you an idea in which direction we go, if you have any special resource needs, like software licenses or things like that, best also to check with me, or if you need any specific technical equipment, check with me in the beginning. We do have some additional in-house capacities, like, for example, we have a professional language editor, we have a professional communications team, and so on. So things where we have a framework contract with a graphic designer. So there are lots of possibilities which we can support your work, but does not need to be in the proposal, will not count against the budget. So, but just keep the 5,000 to 10,000 euros number in mind. And very important, do not include your name or any personal reference or information. We keep in mind because that external reviewers will only receive your proposal. They will not receive your letter of motivation. They will not receive the CV and achievements, and they will solely judge your proposal based on what is standing in the proposal, regardless if you are a PhD student or professor. So, and the page limit is 5 pages, including footnotes, please no endnotes, plus references. So if you would have 2 pages of bibliography, this does not count against the 5 pages. Then it's 7 pages, but the actual text, title, abstract, description of work, time plan, and estimated budget needs to fit into 5 pages. We have the possibility, or we allow in addition, to provide an annex, but this is just optional. This is not part of the core application documents. And here you could, for example, add your complete list of activities such as publications, all the dozens of so you may have done in your career, the projects, speeches, seminars, artistic portfolios, reference from your work, recommendations, letters, and so on. There is no specific, no predefined, let's say, requirements how this look like. But always keep in mind, the annex is optional and is only available to the internal reviewers. And I said there's no page limit, but it must fit into 5 megabytes, a 5 megabyte PDF file. So again, they are free required documents, letter of motivation, CV and achievements, and the proposal. And optionally, you could add an annex, so a maximum of 4 PDF files. Selection criteria. Just to go quickly through it, the first is originality. Is it a new and interesting idea? Quality, is it the state of the art? Is it well structured? Is it understandable? Are the goals achievable, or are the goals clearly stated? Then interface, this is very important. Does it connect to different sectors? For example, bridging between science, business, politics, culture. And this is always a big bonus. You could have a proposal which is purely scientific or purely, let's say, cultural or purely business oriented. But the more you are able to connect with different perspectives, different groups outside of your that immediate part, like science or so, the better. Then, of course, what I mentioned in the beginning, complementarity. Does it connect to the work of the institute? And then feasibility. Is it implementable with your resources of the institute? Ideally, you check, as said, complementarity and feasibility prior to submitting. Having said, prior to submitting, I'm coming to the timeline. As mentioned, August 13, close to midnight is the deadline. No applications will be thereafter accepted. And also, please, no changes of the application will be accepted. So, for example, if you find a spelling error or something like this, or if you say you have miscalculated the budget and so on, that will not be accepted. Not the publication. The application will be accepted as it is and then processed. By middle and September, the internal review of all application documents would be concluded. This is done mostly by the research group leaders at the institute, and at least 2 research group leaders will review every application. By end of October, early November, the external review by 2 reviewers of the proposal, on just the proposal, will be completed. Mid to end of November, we will conduct interviews with the top candidates. We will try to give you a heads up of about, let's say, 2 weeks in this regard. So expect end of October, early November, perhaps mid-November, that you will be contacted. And then by the end of November, early December, and definitely prior to December 15, there will be a decision by the institute, and all applicants will be informed after. The final decision of the institute rests with our 2 directors, Mark Lawrence and Doris Fuchs, who will start on October 1st. And March 2024 will be the early starting date for new fellows. And thank you very much again for listening to this webinar. And if you have any questions, of course, you can always send me an email at achim.maas@rifs-potsdam.de. And I look forward to your questions and wish you all a successful application. Have a nice day.